Hello, everybody, and welcome back. Today we are talking about the conditions in which authoritarian states emerged, weaknesses of political systems. So, just as a refresher, conditions in this sense is referring to what was happening around the country that made an environment for Mao and the communists to seize control. Political systems, we're going to be referring to a form of government such as a republic, a democracy, communist, or authoritarian. In China, we're going to see some very interesting things that occur in terms of why there was such a weak political system. As a refresher, a weak political system or weaknesses of political system is how the government could have been taken advantage of or exploited to allow for a group of people to take control. And in China's case, we're going to see, again, a very interesting major shift that will result in somebody else taking control before Mao. So, there are two examples we're going to be going over in this video. The political fragmentation of China and the nationalists in government. And we're going to see this two very important distinctions because the political fragmentation of China is going to lead to the nationalists in government. But even with the nationalists in government, they're not going to be able to hold, as we are going to see. So, let's dive right in. Now, the weaknesses of the political system and political fragmentation of China. So as you can see on this picture here, what we are looking at is the overall map of what was the Qing dynasty, the Manchurian dynasty. This was what China looked like just before and during World War I. But between 1911 and 1912, there was major fragmentation that started occurring where people started to see that the Manchurian Empire, the Qin dynasty, was not able to hold its ground, was not able to hold its political, essentially its political opponents. So we had the rise of these warlords all across China. And as these warlords started to rise between 1912 and 1916, there was a lot of people who were looking around, a lot of the Chinese elites and the Chinese educated classes who were looking and saying, well, because the fact that the warlords are rising up and because we're starting to see China split, we know that the Qin dynasty is... So because they know that the Qin dynasty is going to end, there's this huge wave that goes over China where people start thinking, well, do we want another dynasty? Do we want to keep our country this big? Do we want democracy? Do we want communism? Do we want, like, there starts to be a lot of people grasping to these new ideologies, really thinking and going against what China currently has and really rejecting the dynastic system. And after World War I, as we heard in our previous video, that comes to play. Because in 1923 to 1927, the warlords successfully take control over their regions in China and just destroy it and split it across all of China. And so, because of this split, there's no unified government, which means the government of Tibet is not like the one in Shanxi, not like the one in Manchuria, not like the one over here in and around Hong Kong. Right? All of these warlords have all these different rules that are just to what fits them best. Sure, the money is still the same, but there's no centralization. There's no central government. And so there are massive gaps and power vacuums where there's a lack of power that create a perfect environment for all of these like little dictators all across China to start ruling their region the way they want to. And it creates a very problematic system, which is why we have the First United Front, where the CCP and the nationalists come together to fight against and reunify China. They were the two largest people pushing for that. They were pushing and pushing and pushing to reunite China because they knew if China wasn't united, then anyone could take over. That if the Europeans were strong enough, they could come and re-seize all of China. That the newly created Soviet Union in the north could come down and take China, or that the South can come up and take over. So between 23 and 27, the First United Front goes through and eliminates all of these warlords. But that's also where we get to the turning of the nationalists against the CCP in the extermination campaigns. And between that time, China is still split up between 27 and 35. But in 35, things change. Because, as we've already discussed, in 35, Japan invades. And when Japan invades, the nationalists, led by Chiang Kai-shek, who's right here, uses his newly found ally, the United States, to fully consolidate China under his rule. So he not only manipulated the situation, but seizes full control of China and holds it on a very tight authoritarian rule, where his policies, his treatment is exactly the same as the warlords. Everything that his government does is an effort to stop the Japanese from conquering by severely cracking down and severely holding the populations by the throat. I mean, his policies were some of the harshest that existed, and he had a strong control. But as we talked about with the impact of war, just because he had a strong control, a majority of the people he's trying to control are slowly being lured by the communists, by Mao, by getting them to join him. And so, despite the fact that he has this major ally, the more violent, the harsher he is, the intensive system that he creates to try to democratize China is pushing populations and pushing people right into the arms of the CCP. And the United States are so busy fighting a war, they don't notice that because of World War II and because of exactly everything that the nationalists are doing, it's creating an environment that essentially, once the larger enemy of Japan is out of the way, the war is imminent. So this government, although does have full control of China, does not truly have control. According to the rest of the world, it is the nationalists. But the reality is, the nationalists can only control the people who they have a gun pointed to. And they can't point a gun to every citizen of China. And when Chiang Kai-shek, as we learned about in the second part 2 of the Chinese Civil War, when he falls to the hands of Mao and they join the Second United Front, he is forced to compromise his government, thus making it even weaker, that he only has to rely on violence, which can only get you so far. Creates an incredibly weak government. It creates an incredibly weak system of, once the threat of Japan is over with, as we see in 45, is why Mao is able to reignite a war. Right? He tells the peasants, look what life was like under this man. Look what life was like under these people. We need to fight against them. Look what the Americans helped have done to us. So, despite the fact that the nationalists and Chiang Kai-shek is in full control of China, the longer they control China, the more violent they are to the Chinese populations, the weaker they're making their government, and thus handing their country over to Mao for his actions. And the stuff that he does really takes advantage of the situation to bolster his support and bolster his overall power in China.